Welcome, Exiles! So I've been tinkering for a while now with this build idea to make a character as close to immortal as possible, and I think I may have succeeded. This is basically a life-based spell cost archmage crit Stormweaver that uses the keystone Sacrifice of Blood from the new Abyss jewel Undying Hate when its tribute is to Tecrod in order to get ridiculously high life regeneration when spamming spells, and then apply that life regen to energy shield as well through Zealot's Oath. But why go Stormweaver and not just go Bloodmage? Well, the first reason is that Stormweaver gets to have arcane surge up permanently, meaning you don't have to go fishing for it with crits like Bloodmages. And in 0.3, with the new notable on the tree that converts the percent more mana regen that Arcane Surge gives into percent more life regen, it allows us to prematurely spam our spells in order to stack the regen and basically have upwards of 8k regen all the time, as long as we're casting any spell that costs life. The second reason is because one of Stormweaver's Ascendancy passives that got reworked in 0.3 now gives 20% increased effect of Arcane Surge for every 10% mana missing, instead of getting increased effect for every flat amount of mana that we have. Because all of our spells will be costing life instead of mana, we can combo this with Mind Over Matter. That way, we provide ourselves with a buffer zone against random bleeds and big damage hits. And if our mana ever takes any damage, we will get a massive increased effect for Arcane Surge, which basically doubles if not even triples our life regen, so the energy shield will just go right back up, on top of also getting a ridiculous amount of cast speed, of course. Now, this is already very high levels of tankiness, but I decided to take it to another level by using Mana Tempest, or should I call it Life Tempest. When we convert Mana Tempest's cost to life, it starts draining our life, but the drain also counts as casting a spell and works with Sacrifice of Blood, allowing us to reach hilarious levels of life regen. Now, this is cool and all, but standing in the Mana Tempest is actually counterproductive with Zealot's Oath, since we'll always be missing some HP and the life regen won't get applied to our energy shield until we top up our life. But luckily, we don't have to stand in it. Mana Tempest has a 1 second cooldown, and when you quality the gem up, it gives us the effects of Mana Tempest for 2 seconds after leaving it. This means that we can just spam it as well as any spell while moving around, and the drained life will instead just get added to our life regen, which allows us to get upwards of 10k regen, if not more, while mapping. And on bosses, you can pre-spam Frost Darts or Frost Bolts to stack up the regen, cast Sigil of Power, then Ice Storm, then Ellie Weakness, Flame Wall, Frostbolt once to apply a chill, and start spamming Frost Darts. You can weave in Mana Tempests here and there if you wish, but that's up to you. Generally, most map bosses just fall over in seconds. There are some that can take a minute or two until they fall, mainly the ones that like moving around a lot. I want to quickly mention the pros and cons of this build before I move to the setup. The pros are it's disgustingly tanky, so it is hardcore viable. It's got amazing map clear, and it can do all content in the game without any issues. The cons are that there are a lot of buttons to press on bosses, and also it's a fairly expensive build which uses a lot of items that are hard to acquire through farming means. So I would say it's probably not very SSF viable. I'll leave the character POV down in the video description if you guys want to check it out. With that being said, let me show you the setup. I'll start off with the gear. Since we're going to be stacking life costs, we'll want to grab the Burden of Shadows Chiming Staff. This staff converts all of our mana skill costs into life costs and gives us 1% of our damage as chaos damage per 3 life costs spent. So, when we cast a spell that costs 900 life for example, it's going to give us 300% of our damage as extra chaos. So it's absolutely a no-brainer. We'll be putting it on our secondary weapon set, and we'll be utilizing automatic weapon swaps in order to cast our spells. I'll explain in further detail about this tech later when I'm going over the gems. On our primary weapon set, we'll want to use the Whispering Ice Permafrost Staff. This staff provides us with elemental exposure on hit through our Ice Storm, as well as providing Ice Storm itself. I talked about this spell already in my previous video and how incredible it is. To summarize it, it does a ton of damage, so why not add it in for some extra boss DPS. Since we're using primarily cold spells, and they all have very high base crit chances, we'll be stacking as much crit chance as we can in order to not have have to worry about crit damage, we'll be using Malagaro's Virtuosity Gloves to set it to 250%. This will allow us to use pinpoint critical on Ice Storm, Frostbolt, and Frost Darts for this 60% more crit chance without caring about the 30% less crit damage. Because we're using Frostbolt, we have to combo it with a Snake Pit Pearl Ring on our left ring slot. This will cancel out the Infinite Pierce on Frostbolt and make it fork instead. So when we're running around spamming Frostbolts, they will explode after forking, causing massive AoE damage to big packs that are bunched up together, and sometimes even one-shotting rares. On our amulet, we want to have +3 level of all spell skills, flat ES, increased ES, and flat mana. I chose to go with Chakra of Life Anoint for some extra increased life recovery rate, but feel free to anoint something else if you wish. The rest of the rare gear is primarily focused on getting as much ES and resist as possible, while also getting some more flat life, flat mana, increased item rarity, and crit chance here and there. If you can, try to also get reduced duration of chill effects on your boots, since chill is the only thing that can technically kill us. Our regen is tied to how fast we can cast, so if we get slowed, we'll have less regen. Also, if you're able to afford it, try and get some spirit on the amulet or body armor so you can fit in blink. Otherwise, you'll have to walk everywhere like me. For our charms, go with freeze, stun, and slow immunity. If you can afford it, grab the Fall of the Axe Silver Charm for free onslaught when you get slowed. For runes, I use increased spell damage on the Whispering Ice Staff, 25% chance for spells to fire 2 additional projectiles on the Burden of Shadows staff, increased ES on body armor, and chaos resistance on boots, gloves, and helmet. If you're super rich, you can also use the runes that give +1 to level of all spell skills on the staves, which will give even more damage. Also, if you can afford it, grab and socket movement speed runes on your boots, because as we all know, movement speed is king in PoE 2. For catalyst qualities, go with caster on the Snake Pit ring, mana on the other ring, and defense on the amulet. The flasks don't matter, so you can use whatever you want there. On the tree, we're primarily focused on getting spell damage, LE damage, cold damage, crit chance, ES, and increased mana and life costs. I want to quickly mention some more important notables. The first one is asceticism. We don't have a lot of life, so basing our stun threshold on 30% of our ES is very important to prevent getting permanently stunned by enemies when our stun immunity charm is down. Sanguimantic Rituals converts the % more mana regen that we get from Arcane Surge into % more life regen. This, comboed with Sacrifice of Blood, is the main reason we're able to reach such ridiculous amounts of life regen. Touch the Arcane and the small notables leading up to it grant increased effect of Arcane Surge, meaning more life regen and more cast speed. This notable is a must-have. For our jewels, we're using Undying Hate with Tribute to Tecrod, as I mentioned earlier, in order to get the Sacrifice of Blood keystone. This is an extremely expensive jewel because all the Bloodmages are using it, but it's definitely worth it. We're using a From Nothing jewel with Unwavering Stance, so we can allocate the notable Hail Heart and the 2 life regen small passives around it. You can also take some reduced slowing potency of debuffs from the Unyielding notable and the 2 small passives near it, but that's up to you. And on the last jewel slot, I'm using a Prism of Belief with +3 levels to Frost Darts for more boss damage. On the Ascendancy, we'll be using Constant Gale, which will grant us permanent Arcane Surge buff, Strike twice to apply 2 shocks for some extra damage, and Shaper of Storms to actually apply the shocks. And the last Ascendancy notable that I want to talk about is Force of Will. This is the notable that got reworked in 0.3 that I mentioned earlier. It now grants 20% increased effect of Arcane Surge per 10% missing mana. This is absolutely massive for us when we combo it with Mind Over Matter, because not only do we utilize our mana bar as an extra layer of HP, but also if our energy shield ever goes down and we take damage to our mana, we will get the increased effect of Arcane Surge instantly, meaning we'll get way more life regen and cast speed during that time, so our energy shield will instantly just go back up on its own because our regen will essentially get doubled, tripled, and even quadrupled if we reach 0% mana. This passive is especially good on maps where monsters make you bleed a lot, since bleed ignores our energy shield and damages our mana directly. Now it's time for the gems. We're getting Heart of Ice and Ice Storm from the Whispering Ice Permafrost staff, and we'll be socketing in Cold Mastery and Slow Potency in Heart of Ice. Heart of Ice is there just to provide us with the initial chill on bosses in order to improve at least one bolt on our Ice Storm for more damage. We're going to be using Ice Storm on big beefy targets, like bosses, for a little bit of extra damage, and we're going to be draining our mana that way in order to get a bit more cast speed. We're using Pinpoint Critical for some extra crit chance, Concentrated Area to tighten the storm's radius so more bolts overall hit the target, Considered Casting for some extra damage, and the new lineage support gem Zarok's Refrain. This gem is amazing when comboed with Ice Storm since it has a base limit of 3 storms, and the gem allows you to reach it with only one cast, since it will echo and repeat the spell 2 more times. The downside is that it receives a cooldown of 5 seconds, but that's not a problem at all since Ice Storm's base duration is 6 seconds anyway. Also, if you don't want to be bothered with mana at all, just swap Considered Casting for Life Tap and you should be good to go. On Sigil of Power, we'll be using Cooldown Reduction 2, Prolonged Duration 2, and Magnified Area 2. We want the buff area to be larger, and we want it to last longer. Frostbolt is going to be our general map clear, and we'll be linking it up with Pinpoint Critical for more crits. We'll be using Unleash to increase the life costs and add extra projectiles. Projectile Acceleration 3 because it gives us increased life costs and also gives us 40% more prod speed, which is really useful to make the balls travel a bit faster. Nova Projectiles, so we get 4 additional projectiles and they fire in a circle. The 40% less damage is painful, but the AoE coverage more than makes up for it. And the last gem we'll be using is Embitter. This gem converts all the different percent damage gained as extra cold. We're getting a ton of extra damage as lightning and chaos from Archmage and the Burdens of Shadow staff, so converting it all into cold makes it way easier to scale cold damage. Frost Darts is going to be our main damage source against rare monsters and bosses. We'll be linking it up with Pinpoint Critical for more crits, Unleash because it multiplies our projectiles every other cast while also giving us vastly increased life costs. The new lineage support gem Atalui's Bloodletting is the 3rd gem we'll want to use because it works pretty much the exact same way as the Burden of Shadow staff, but instead of gaining extra chaos damage, we gain extra fizz per life cost spent. After that, we'll be using Cold Penetration support for some extra boss damage and because it increases life costs. And lastly, Embitter. Like with Frostbolt, we're gaining a ton of damage as extra chaos and lightning, but now we're also gaining a ton of damage as extra physical as well, thanks to Ataluis. So Embitter converting all of that into cold damage is super good in order to scale its damage even further. We'll be using Mana Tempest with cooldown recovery 2 and Lightning Mastery. We're using a level 14 Archmage to further increase our life costs as much as possible. The damage part of it doesn't get scaled with levels, only the costs get reduced, so having a higher level gem serves no purpose to us. We're adding Flame Wall to make our Frost Darts do even more damage, and we're linking it with Fortress 2, Prolonged Duration 2, Spell Cascade, and Fire Mastery. This is mainly just a utility spell, so all of its supports are focused on area coverage and duration. And finally, I'm using Elemental Weakness with Heightened Curse, Prolonged Duration 2, and Life Tap. This is mostly for extra boss damage. I think now is a good time to talk about weapon swaps. In 0.3, GGG made weapon swaps instant, and I showcased how seamless it is in my previous video. But the quick TLDR is that we'll be selecting our spells to only cast with either weapon set 1 or 2, depending on what we want. And don't worry, it's all automatic, so you don't have to even think about it. It will just work. We want to cast Frostbolt, Frost Darts, Mana Tempest, and Flame Wall with our Burden of Shadow staff. So click the arrow key next to the DPS tooltip on each of those spells and select only weapon set 2. Make sure your Burden of Shadows is on your weapon set 2 as well. Ellie Weakness, select it to only cast with weapon set 1, so it gains a few extra levels. That about covers everything about this build. I've been working on this for the better part of a week now, theory crafting and testing different things, and I do have to say, I am very satisfied with how it ended up. I managed to clear all content in the game with this build on the highest difficulty, absolute blast, clearing juiced endgame maps with it, and I hope you guys will enjoy it as much as I did. If you guys have any questions or recommendations, drop them down in the comments below, and I'll reply back to you as soon as I can. If you liked the video and you wish to see my future PoE content, make sure to drop a like and a sub, and I'll see you all in the next video. Stay sane, Exiles.